Basics of garment making. When you want to make a garment, you need to analyze the design first and should identify the various body measurements to be taken for making the garment. The process of garment making involves 4 major steps. They are taking body measurements, constructing the pattern according to the drafting instructions, marking and cutting of the pattern and fabric, and sewing of the garment. In this session, we will see these 4 major steps in detail. At the end of the session, you will be able to explain all the steps involved in making a garment. Let's see the 4 main steps involved in garment making in detail. Step 1. Taking body measurements. The garment that you make should fit properly. For that, you need to take the body measurements of the person for whom you are making the garment. The body measurements to be taken will depend upon the design of the garment. We have a set of symbols representing each of the body measurements. In order to take body measurements, you should be able to read the measuring tape accurately, have an understanding about fractions, and the standard body measurements required for a garment. Step 2. Construction of pattern. The next step in the making of a garment is the construction of pattern. Pattern is a template created for making a garment. Every pattern will have a set of drafting instructions. The drafting instruction describes each line in the pattern and will help us to draw the pattern. Drafting instructions will also have seam allowance and wearing ease added to the body measurements for drafting. This is how the drafting instructions will look like. These set of instructions will remain constant for each garment. As you can see here, these symbols represent the body measurements required for making the particular garment. The body measurements will vary according to the measurements taken. But in our videos, we have used standard measurements for drafting purpose. It is always recommended to first construct the pattern in your notebook. To construct the pattern in the notebook, you should know how to read patterns and the drafting instructions, the construction technique, and numerical calculations. Step 3. Marking and cutting on fabric. Now that we have the calculations and pattern ready, we need to transfer this onto the fabric and cut the fabric. This step has to be done very accurately as it will affect the final shape of the garment. If you make mistakes while doing this step, it may also result in wastage of fabric. It is also important to know about fabric selection and estimation, folding and layout technique, pattern drafting and cutting techniques to do this step. Step 4. Sewing. Sewing is the final stage of garment making. Once you have all the cutout fabric pieces, you can sew them together to make your garment. You have to be extremely careful while joining the pieces together. You need to follow accurate seam allowances as per the drafting instructions to get a perfect fit. The stitches should be neat so as to get a good finish of the garment. In order to do proper sewing, you need to learn basic hand stitches, sewing machine operation, basic sewing practices, garment finishing techniques like seams, hems, neckline finishing, etc. In this session, we have seen the various steps involved in making of a garment. Before we conclude, let's take a look at the key steps involved in garment making. Step 1. Taking body measurements. Step 2. Constructing the pattern according to the drafting instructions. Step 3. Marking and cutting of the pattern on fabric. Step 4. Sewing of garment. With that, we've come to the end of the session.